The silence in your hiding place within ancient Egypt carried a different weight, a cold that crawled along your spine just before the first glow of dawn. The air was thick and still, clinging heavily to your skin like the stubborn heat trapped in the temple's adobe walls. You felt the fine sand sift between your bare toes, a gentle reminder of your secret tether to this forsaken sanctuary. Your eyes adjusted to the dim, where shadows stretched long and slow across the cracked stone floor. The faint, acrid scent of burned papyrus curled into your nostrils, mingling with the damp, earthy smell of the temple's mossy decay. It was a quiet room, but not peaceful. Every creak, every whisper of movement outside echoed like a thunderclap in your ears. If today dropping Wi-Fi drives you to near madness, then imagine how fragile your hidden worship felt. Under the weight of unbroken silence, your fingers found the small statuette of Horus, the falcon god, tracing its cool, smooth surface with delicate care. Each stroke was slow, intentional, a ritual to keep your faith alive in the shadows. The bronze gleamed faintly, catching traces of the morning light slipping through the narrow window. You polished it again, knowing that any careless movement could unravel the fragile thread between devotion and doom. From your hiding spot, you peered through the narrow door slats. The distant murmur of priests chanting to Ra floated on the thick air, accompanied by subdued voices from the courtyard, where sworn enemies plotted in murmurs and glances. Your heart beat steady but alert, syncing with the cautious rhythm of your breath. You prepared the next offering, a simple blend of water and cedar oil, with practiced precision, aware that a single mistake might expose your allegiance. The small task repeated itself in quiet loops. Check the statuette's shine. Listen for footsteps. Measure the oil's aroma. Confirm the water's purity. The monotony was your ally, a soft lull weaving its way through your nerves. Yet beneath the surface, the tension never left, simmering in every deliberate gesture. Suddenly, a sharp crack from the courtyard sliced through the stillness. You froze. Heads turned beyond the threshold, shadows stretching and twisting in a slow, unfolding suspicion. The murmurs died down to a sharp silence, as if the temple itself held its breath. Your pulse quickened, not with frantic fear, but the cold spike of sharp awareness that the delicate balance of your secret life was teetering. Before the moment could unravel further, your thoughts gathered like heavy, slow curtains drawing shut. The cool air pressed fragile shield of calm before the unknown. This was the edge of your world, poised between quiet survival and the peril just beyond reach. Hey, before Morpheus claims you fully, take a quick check to make sure you're still subscribed. For some, the button's gone missing, and I don't want you to miss the next sleep stories. Enjoy and leave a like, soft as a pillow. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Your interaction keeps this little calm spot alive. Thanks for being part of it. The crack dissolved into the stillness, but your muscles refused to relax. Your breath paused, shallow and steady, as if the air itself held its breath alongside you. You sensed the weight of countless eyes pressed invisibly against your hiding place, the narrow door slats growing colder, the faint whisper of distant footsteps blending with the temple's restless creaks. Heat clung reluctantly to your skin, an oppressive veil woven from centuries of sun-baked stone and the damp chill of forgotten secrets. Your fingers lingered on the statuette of Horus, the falcon god whose vigilant gaze seemed to pierce through the lingering shadows. The bronze was cool and smooth beneath your touch, tracing the contours of wings folded close, protecting you in this fragile moment. Each deliberate stroke anchored you deeper in the ritual, a slow heartbeat in the silence, a fragile thread tying you to a belief older than the shifting desert sands. Outside, the chants of priests wove a rising chorus, their voices rippling over stone and sand, a tide of sound swelling cautiously beneath the temple's vast dome. Yet beneath this sacred murmur, your senses peeled back the layers, rustling fabrics, hushed curses swallowed abruptly, a shuffle of feet pressed flat against the cold floor. You exhaled softly, a feather of sound lost in the growing morning light. Your eyes adjusted to the deepening gloom in the corner of the chamber, where shadows pooled like slow-moving smoke curling from unseen fires. The smell of burned papyrus, tinged with something raw and metallic, rose faintly. An echo of anger, of urgency smoldered beneath the temple's calm exterior. Your thoughts moved carefully, like fingertips testing the surface of water waiting to ripple. Your hand moved to the small vessel beside you, a delicate blend of water and cedar oil, their scents mingling in quiet harmony. You lifted the vessel slowly, mindful of the slight tremor in your arm, pouring a drop onto the cracked stone altar. The oil spread like liquid amber, catching the weak light, exuding that familiar with the cold dusk pressing through the small window slit. You inhaled that scent, grounding yourself for the moment that stretched, taut and fragile. A sudden shadow flickered beyond the slats, flicking damp leaves in the courtyard into restless patterns. Your heart traced each movement, steady yet sharp, but tuned to the subtleties of breathing walls and shifting stone. The air itself seemed to vibrate, like the faint hum of a distant drum, swift and imperceptible. You willed yourself to remain still, a statue carved from patience and quiet tension. Time folded in on itself as you began the slow, deliberate checks, brushing the statuette's surface once more, eyes tracing invisible cracks in the temple walls, listening to the nuanced shifts in distant footsteps. Your senses sharpened to the whisper of your own pulse, the faint scrape of cloth against skin, the tick of a heart beating in. measured rhythm. The courtyard murmurs paused, then resumed in soft murmurs like distant waves. The world outside faded to a shallow breath, replaced by the textures that wrapped around you. You felt the grain of sand beneath your bare feet, rough and cool, slipping between each toe like a minuscule tide. The temple stones held their own kind of memory, rough, jagged edges softened by centuries of wind and devotion. A tiny fragment of moss, damp and velvety, brushed against your finger as your hand rested briefly on the altar's base. You returned to the statuette, polishing again, each slow movement a thread woven in the vast tapestry of survival and secrecy. The temple seemed to lean in, the low murmurs of priests blending with distant rustles of armor, and the faint scrape of stone against leather. This low hum of life under tension wrapped around you, like a slow tide, each pulse marking the thin line between invisibility and exposure. Then a distant flicker caught your attention. The glint of metal far beyond the temple walls, muted by distance and dust. Your breath caught a thin ribbon of cold air threading through your lungs. The grove of palms surrounding the courtyard shivered faintly in an unseen breeze, shadows dancing between the ancient trunks as light began to bleed through cracks in the stone. You moved with purpose, slow and deliberate, each step measured like the turning of a clock's hands. The echo of your footfall sifted lightly over stone, swallowed quickly by the wide cathedral ceiling. The scent of cedar and earth grew stronger as you passed the altar again. You're etched with faded glyphs. The thin shafts of morning light spilled like gentle rivers onto the polished floor, their soft glow a fragile reassurance amid the encroaching uncertainty. You felt the temple's breath beside you, the weight of unseen watchers cloaked within shadows. The faint clink of a small chain brushed against stone, a sound so delicate it might have been imagined. Your fingers twitched, instinct sharpening every nerve ending. Through the crack beneath the heavy door across the hall, you glimpsed a slender shaft of pale light, sunlight, inching its way forward like the first tentative breath of the day. Your pulse slowed beneath the cold gaze of Horus's statuette as you knelt beside the altar. Sweat prickled at your temples despite the cool air pressed tight against your skin. The scent of cedar oil lingered on your fingertips, mingling with faint resin and dust. The gods watched in silence, their vigilance mirrored only by your own careful breath. From the courtyard, a distant murmur rippled again, less a chant, more a hush stretched tight. Your breath steadied, becoming the slow rhythm of patience. The shadow beyond the door shifted, a steep silence holding a secret poised to unravel. You allowed your senses to stretch outward, searching for the delicate thread between calm and chaos. And then, a single, deliberate step echoed faintly on the polished stone, slow enough that your heart could count every tremor. The temple's breath caught as the sound drew close, steady, measured, deliberate, like the measured tick of fate turning a page you feared to read. The hollow stone beneath you seemed to sigh, the morning light stilled in a suspended sliver. Your gaze rested on the statuette, knew the fragile balance was shifting. The next moment would come swiftly, like the desert wind before the storm. The step faded into silence, yet your body remained a still statue, each muscle taut beneath your skin, a fragile thread resisting the pull of rest. Your breath traced tentative circles in the cool air, shallow and deliberate, as you lingered in the heavy stillness. The ancient stones around you seemed to press inward, as if the temple itself held its fragile secret close, wary of the morning light inching through the narrow window slit. Your fingers drifted once again to the statuette of Horus, the falcon god whose watchful gaze was a quiet sentinel in the shadows. The bronze surface was cool and smooth beneath your touch, grounding you through the long, unfolding moment. You traced the delicate wings, feeling the faint ridges carved centuries ago, imagining the god's silent protection wrapping around you like a cloak against unseen eyes. Outside, the muted chorus of the priest's chants began to grow thicker, rolling softly over the stone pillars and fading slowly into the distance. The rising tide of their voices was steady and solemn, a reminder of a world humming with rituals you could not yet join openly. Yet beneath the sacred song, faint sounds slipped through, the careful rustling of fabric, the subtle scrape of leather boots against cold stone, and a whisper of low words swallowed quickly in the vastness. The air shifted, almost imperceptibly, carrying the sharp aroma of cedar oil mingled with the dusty earth. Your hand moved cautiously to the small vessel beside you, its weight a familiar comfort in the cool morning light. You lifted it slowly and poured a drop of the oily blend onto your palm, the scent unfolding softly, a balm against the growing tension lodged deep in your chest. You stepped forward, slow and steady, letting your bare feet feel the grainy sand sift between your toes once more. The floor beneath was rough with age, cracked lines spreading like tributaries across a forgotten river. Each footfall whispered quietly, a rhythm measured and cautious as you edged along the corridor. The sense of moss and ancient stone wrapped around you, damp and sweet, recalling long-forgotten rains and the slow pulse of time pressed into these walls. A distant murmur flickered into hearing, a low, deliberate conversation hushed beneath the rising sun. You against ribs tight with preparation, steady yet sharp, aware of all the fragile threads poised to unravel. The faintest glint caught your eye beyond a narrow archway. Soft gleam of metal, dulled by dust, yet unmistakably deliberate. You inhaled slowly, the cool air filling your lungs, mingling with the warm scent of incense, lingering in the hollow spaces of the temple. A subtle breath of wind stirred dry leaves in the distant courtyard, casting delicate shadows that danced like ghosts across worn stone. You pressed your palm against the cold altar once more, feeling the rough surface etched with faded script, each groove a secret whispered by the ancients. The cedar oil clung lightly to your skin, a lingering warmth that contrasted the cool kiss of the temple air. Time stretched out, each moment a slow wave, folding over itself as you began the meticulous ritual. Again, your fingers brushed the statuette, steady and purposeful, tracing its form with reverence and care. A soft dance of devotion in the quiet, looming tension. Beyond the door slats, your ears caught the faintest scrape of movement. Slow, measured, almost reluctant. You still yourself, heart held in suspended anticipation, sensing the weight of many unseen eyes resting upon you. The temple breathed, a vast, heavy exhale pressed tight against stone and sand. The scent of burned papyrus rose faintly, mingling with something raw and metallic underneath. A subtle sign of unrest pulsing in the air like a whisper of danger. Your gaze drifted over the rising light, long fingers of gold causing the stone to glow with a gentle warmth. It was a fragile moment of calm, caught between two breaths. You stepped lightly forward, each footfall soft and deliberate, echoing faintly beneath the high domed ceiling. The carved hieroglyphs on the walls seemed to watch you, ancient eyes blinking slowly in the soft morning light. Somewhere beyond, the low murmur of prayer folded into the temple's breathless silence, a counterpoint to the slow tightening knot of tension in your bones. Your hand hovered over the altar, fingers seeking the cool touch of water. Pressed into a shallow basin, you dipped your palm carefully, the liquid cold and soothing. A whisper of purity against your heated skin. The scent of fresh water mingled with cedar oil, grounding you once more in this fragile sanctuary. Each deliberate drop was a small act of defiance against the unseen eyes that lingered just beyond the shadows. From the courtyard, a sudden shift in sound, soft leather brushing over stone, pulled your attention sharply. Movement stirred beyond the temple walls. Quiet sheet of glass, trembling with the faintest touch. You pressed your body flat against the cool stone. Breath caught but steady, feeling the slow pulse of your heart unfold in careful, measured beats. The temple's vast shadow draped over you like a veil, and through the narrow crack beneath the heavy door opposite you, a pale light slid silently forward, slow and purposeful, like the first breath before a storm's arrival. The falcon's eyes seemed to gleam faintly in the muted glow, guarding the stillness with an ancient fierceness. Your pulse slowed, each breath measured against the cold air, as you knelt beside the altar once more. Sweat traced thin lines along your temples, despite the clinging chill that pressed against your skin. The scent of cedar oil was warm beneath your fingertips, mingling softly with dust and the faintest hint of smoke lingering in the air. The gods watched in silence as you held your breath alongside them, waiting. A single shadow peeled away from the deeper gloom beyond the doorway, slow and deliberate, a shape moving with quiet intent that set your entire body on edge. The temple held its breath, suspended between the fading night and the breaking dawn. Your heart, steady yet sharp, counted the moments, knowing the fragile balance was shifting. And then, in the very stillness that seemed to swallow the world whole, a faint, deliberate sound, a soft click against stone, echoed low and slow, weaving through the temple's ancient bones like a whispered challenge. The click lingered in the thick, ancient air, weaving a thread that tightened around your chest. Your breath stayed shallow and silent, a fragile mist held captive beneath the slow crawl of dawn's hesitant light. Time folded like a slow-moving wave, each second stretching, fragile and taut. You didn't move immediately, letting the stillness swell and recede like soft tides against the temple's cold stone. The faint scent of cedar oil mingled with the stubborn dust, sinking deeper into your skin as your fingers tightened lightly on the statuette of Horus. The falcon's features, worn smooth by careful ritual, seemed sharper now, a silent sentinel watching with quiet intent. Your bare feet shifted just the slightest fraction against the rough sand, each grain a tiny weight pressing down. The floor beneath was cracked and uneven, the traces of 1,000 whispered prayers traced in the fractured lines. You felt the cool touch of a nearby pillar, rough moss clinging to its base like forgotten memories, damp and soft beneath your palm. The temple breathed slowly around you, a hollow exhale steeped in centuries of vigil. Outside, the murmur of step and breath dissolved into waves of hushed voices, muffled and blurry at the edges. The courtyard's shadow played with light, twisting and folding like dark silk caught in an unseen breeze. Somewhere far off, a faint metal gleam caught the new sun, dull and unreadable in its distance. Your gaze lingered there, a tether to a world both known and perilously unknown. You shifted, slow and deliberate, feeling the cool stone altar beneath your fingers as you knelt once more. The vessel of cedar oil rested close, its weight grounding you in the ritual's grace. You lifted it carefully, the drop of oil spreading golden and unhurried across the altar's scarred surface. The aroma rose like a soft flame, warm and steady against the gathering chill. The temple's stillness pressed closer, every sound amplified in the thick air. The scrape of leather boots whispered faintly. Beyond the outer halls, slow and measured, deliberate like a shadow tracing your path. Your heartbeat tuned to the rhythm, slow beats rolling like distant thunder under the priest's rising chants. The scent of burned papyrus floated subtly, a lingering trace of unrest, raw and bitter. You allowed your fingertips to linger on Horus's wings, tracing every carved line with reverence, feeling the cool metal vibrate faintly beneath your touch, a quiet pulse, a steady heartbeat in the growing dawn. A flicker of movement caught your eye through the narrow slit beside the doorway, shadows grazing over sand and stone. The leaves in the courtyard shivered briefly, stirred by a secret breeze that carried whispers of something unsettled. The temple's breath seemed to catch, as if holding itself in suspended weight. You rose slowly, each motion deliberate, as if unfolding time itself. The echo of your footsteps fell lightly over cracked stone, fading beneath the cathedral ceiling where ancient glyphs watched with silent wisdom. The air was thick with the scent of earth and resin, a blend of forgotten rain and burning incense lingering in the corners. Your hands brushed gently against the cool wall, rough but steady under your palm, grounding you further in this fragile sanctuary. The distant voices thickened, a ripple of conspiratorial murmurs blending with the sacred chants beyond the pillars. The subtle scratch of a small chain brushed stone, delicate as a spider's thread, breaking the silence with a fragile urgency. You peered through the gap beneath the heavy door across the hall. The pale morning light stretched slowly forward like a tentative breath. Your heart steadied beneath the gaze of Horus's bronze sentinel. Sweat beading lightly at your temples despite the cool air wrapping your skin. The oil's warm scent clung to your fingers as you knelt once more, dipping your palm into the basin of water at the altar's base. The liquid was cold and sharp, a whisper of clarity against your heated pulse, mingling with the faint aroma of dust and smoke that curled through the temple's veins. The faint scrape of footfall stirred the silence again, slow, deliberate, reluctant. You pressed your body flat against the cold stone, breath measured, senses apertured wide. The temple held its breath with you, a heavy shroud pulled tight above your shoulders. A distant flicker brightened the courtyard, a metal glint shifting under fractured sunlight. The palms quivered as a breeze soughing through carried a scent of iron and dry leaves. Your eyes followed the stirring shadows, drawing a silent map of threats and escapes etched into the shifting sands. Returning to the altar, You traced worn glyphs with trembling fingers, every groove a quiet invocation. The warm oil and cold water mingled under your touch, like the calm ripple before a storm. The chants rose again, a wave of sound rolling just beyond the walls, steady, solemn, a hymn to the gods that both comforted and warned. A shadow detached itself from the gloom at the temple's entrance, slow, deliberate, a figure moving with a grace born of practiced caution. Your breath caught. The temple's vast stillness folding gracefully around you, a cradle holding you on the edge of the unknown. The falcon's eyes seemed to flicker in the faint light, wings poised to take flight as the ancient stones settled into silent witness. The delicate balance in this chamber, this sanctuary carved from secrecy and faith, was tipping, inch by weighted inch, your gaze fixed on the narrow door, that thin shaft of light pressing ever forward, promising revelation, peril, or perhaps something yet beyond the reach of fear. The next breath held the sound of a future unfolding, soft, deliberate, unyielding, and then, from the depths beyond, a sudden creak whispered low, a single, deliberate note in the quiet symphony of dawn. Your heart stilled for the moment, understanding that the fragile thread you clung to would pull taut, and the shadow stepping inside would tip the scales forever. The slow creak of the door's ancient hinges sliced through the brittle dawn silence, a sound as tentative as your own heartbeat, steady but weighted. You remained still, muscles taut beneath the rough fabric of your garment, bare feet anchored to the cracked stone floor, where centuries of dust seemed to hold breath. The narrow shaft of light beneath the doorway still pressed forward slowly, an uninvited whisper advancing into your fragile refuge. Your fingers found Horus's statuette again, fingertips tracing the familiar ridges of the folded wings, the cold bronze grounding you as the temple's breath tightened. The scent of cedar oil lingered, a tender flame flickering against the chill, the fragile warmth you clung to amid the heavy shadows. Outside, the chorus of priests' chants surged softly like waves, distant and unwavering, yet beneath that sacred tide, the murmurs had quieted. The courtyard seemed to hold its secrets tight. Hushed tones swallowed beneath the stone archways, the subtle scrape of leather, a ghostly rhythm threading through the cool air. Each sound sharpened your senses, the soft thud of a footfall, the rustle of fabric stealing close enough to disturb the stillness. You pressed yourself a fraction closer to the cold altar, the worn stone biting gentle pressure into your palms as you knelt. The basin at the altar's base held steady water, clear and sharp against the heat clamoring inside you. Slowly you dipped your fingers, the chill seeping in like distant rain falling through desert heat, a breath of purity in that sealed sanctuary. Your gaze lifted briefly to the faded glyphs curling across the high pillars. Time seemed to fold upon itself there. Those ancient marks whispering long-forgotten prayers, as the first pale rays of sun filtered through cracks above. Dust motes drifted silently in the beams, golden and slow, floating like specters in the cool temple air. The faint flicker of movement caught your eye at the far end of the gallery, a shadow distinct yet careful, pausing as if weighing each step before it dared to intrude further. Your breath held tight, sinking deep into your chest, a measured draw caressing your lungs. The click of something metallic shifted. The air, a soft, deliberate sound that seemed to echo and expand in the temple's hollow bones. The delicate balance you maintained felt ever more tenuous, as though a spider's web stretched just beyond reach, waiting to snap or hold firm beneath the weight of an unseen breath. You moved slowly, putting bare feet carefully to the stone, each step a subdued whisper on this stage of sand and silence. The cracked floor seemed to shift underfoot. A chorus of small cracks whispering ancient secrets beneath your cautious presence. Your hand lingered on the altar again, fingers brushing the small vessel of cedar oil with reverence. A single drop spread languidly across the stone, amber warmth blooming in the pale glow, carrying with it the scent of the deep woods and distant storms long past. You inhaled slowly, the aroma weaving a fragile thread between past and present, grounding you against the rising tide of tension. The distant chanting ebbed and flowed, a solemn tide beneath the temple's vast dome, mixing with the rising murmur of voices just beyond the walls. The low hum of whispered plotting, the scrape of armor hidden in shadow, the subtle shifting of feet, each sound layered like sediment beneath the chanting. A tapestry of quiet unease stretched across the dawn. Your eyes drifted toward the narrow archway beyond, where the subtle gleam of metal flickered faintly, too distant and blurred to shape fully, yet enough to set your nerves alight. The outward movement of palms shifted in the breeze, casting patterns that danced with the uncertain light. Shadows stretched long and lean, as if listening for secrets held too tightly. Kneeling once more beside the altar, you allowed your hand to rest lightly on the worn stone, feeling its history seep through the cracked surface like a quiet heartbeat. The rise and fall of your breath slowed and lengthened, matching the temple's ageless rhythm. The faint scent of smoke mingled with earth and oil, a whispered trace of unrest curling through the stillness. A careful scrape nearby, almost cat-like in its hesitation, drew your attention again. Slowly, you pressed your body flatter against the stone wall, breath diminished to a shallow thread. Every nerve shone bright beneath your skin, attuned to the secret currents flowing around you, a delicate game played in silence and shadow. Your fingers tightened around Horus's statuette as a shadow peeled away from the waiting gloom of the doorway. It moved with a slow, unyielding grace, the delicate pulse of intent vibrating through the air. The temple seemed to hold its breath with you, a shared stillness suspended. Between fading night and breaking day, the falcon's eyes caught a sudden gleam in the shifting light, wings poised beneath your touch like a promise not yet fulfilled. You felt the fragile thread pull taut in your chest, the balance shifting, half held, trembling between what was known and what was silently waiting beyond reach. Then, as the soft click faded into silence, a distant whisper of movement behind the hidden corridor reached you, faint but unmistakable. Your gaze swung sharply to the source, a narrow crack between stone slabs, revealing the slightest shape, dark and flickering, stepping cautiously forward. Your breath stuck in your throat as the temple's vast shadows deepened, and the next breath of morning carried with it the sound of a secret unfolding at last. The creak of the ancient door, morning air, pressing gently through the narrow window slit. You felt the temple's breath tighten around you, shadows pooling deeper along the cracked stone floor, each a quiet sentinel watching your measured movements. Your fingertips lingered on the cool bronze of Horus's statuette once more, tracing the delicate wings that seemed to hold a promise of protection, even as uncertainty gathered like dust in the heavy air. Outside, the chorus of distant chanting faltered briefly, the voices dipping and rising like slow waves under the vast dome. The sacred tide ebbed and swelled, carrying with it the faintest impressions. Whispers swallowed quick, the soft scrape of leather against stone, the breath held too long, and then released in cautious steps. You remained motionless, heart steady but alert, each beat a slow drum marking time inside the sanctuary's heavy shell. Your bare feet rested on the grains of sand, cool and shifting, pressing softly into the rough stone beneath. The floor was a map of forgotten prayers, each crack a river flowing through centuries of silence and secrecy. The scent of cedar oil rose again, warm and familiar, mingling with the faint trace of smoke and the dusty earth, carrying you deeper into the ritual that kept your faith tethered to this hidden sanctuary. A flicker of movement caught the edge of your vision beyond the doorway, a shadow unfolding slowly, deliberate yet cautious. You inhaled quietly, the cool air threading through your lungs, mingled with the rich aroma of cedar and damp stone. Your hand moved gently, brushing the worn altar once more, the smoothness breaking into rough, etched script beneath your fingertips. Time seemed to fold, seconds stretching out like the soft reach of desert dawn light, spilling over ancient glyphs. The faintest sound of metal shifting, a soft click that carried through the temple's vaulted bones, sent a ripple through your senses. You held your breath, still and tight as the silence thickened, waiting in the fragile tension of seconds that stretched long and thin like strands of spun gold. Your gaze wandered warily to the narrow crack beneath the heavy door, where pale light nudged forward, inch by careful inch. The shadow beyond moved with measured grace, a quiet rhythm that pressed against the heavy stillness, a ripple in the air that seemed to hum beneath your skin. The world outside and within balanced on a fragile edge, poised between revelation and retreat. Each step you took was slow and deliberate, the soft pressure of sand yielding beneath your toes, a lullaby whispered underfoot. The cool stone pressed against your palms as you brushed. A statuette again, the bronze surface a steady anchor in the swelling tide of anxious anticipation. The scent of incense lingered in the air, a smoky curl weaving through the temple's ancient breath, binding past and present in the tightrope of this moment. The murmurs beyond the thick stone walls pulsed softly, shadows slipping low and lean beneath the high pillars. Somewhere in the distance, a faint glint of metal touched the new sun, dull and deliberate, catching your eye and threading a ribbon of cold alertness through your chest. You exhaled slowly, letting the warmth of cedar oil ground you as your fingers traced the falcon's wings, feeling the cool ridges rub faintly against your skin. The altar beneath you bore the weight of ritual and secrecy, each groove a whispered prayer, half forgotten, yet alive beneath your touch. The temple wrapped you in its deep, hollow echo, the soft footfalls beyond a delicate melody. Slow, hesitant, deliberate. Your heart counted the passage of each sound, steady and sharp, the careful susurrus of fabric shifting lightly against stone. A subtle breeze stirred dry leaves in the distant courtyard, casting restless shadows that danced like fleeting ghosts amidst the dust-worn trunks. You shifted forward, every motion measured, like a breath held in silent reverence. The stained walls seemed to lean inward, ancient glyphs watching with eyes half closed, witnessing the tightrope you walked between safety and discovery. Your hand brushed the basin again, dipping fingers into the cool water, with a slow, graceful motion, the liquid a tranquil ripple against the rising tension inside you. The faint scrape of a chain echoed softly, delicate as a spider's thread pulling taut in the heavy shadows. You pressed yourself flat against the taut beneath the rough fabric of your garment, breath shallow but unyielding. Time seemed to pulse in slow waves, each fold beckoning toward the unknown lurking just beyond the narrow arch. Suddenly, a soft shift in shadow, a silhouette breaking free from the darkness beyond the doorway, moved with the seamless grace of silence itself. Your breath caught like a whispered prayer, lungs tightening as the temple's vast quiet wrapped you both in a shared stillness. The falcon's bronze eyes caught the light and gleamed faintly, wings poised as though ready to take flight at the cusp of dawn. The fragile balance you guarded trembled, stretched thin like spider silk in a desert breeze, suspended between the fading night and the first glow of day. Your pulse slowed beneath the watchful gaze of Horus, every breath a slow thread, weaving you deeper into the unfolding moment. A distant murmur brushed against your ears, barely more than a whisper carried on dry wind. A secret unraveling just beyond your reach. The light beneath the heavy door stretched forward, a pale ribbon threading through the stone, illuminating the silent promise that what was about to arrive would tip the scales forever. And then, as a single soft footfall fell weighted and true upon the polished stone floor, you knew the delicate balance would shatter in the next breath. The soft footfall echoed again, a measured step threading slowly across the worn stone floor. Your breath lingered like a fragile mist in the cool air, as your gaze locked on the shadow shifting through the doorway ahead. The temple's vast silence tightened around you, each heartbeat stretched thin, drawn out like the flickering wings of a falcon about to soar. Your palms pressed lightly against the cold altar, pulses rolling beneath your skin in steady, deliberate waves. The ancient walls seemed to breathe with the weight of centuries, their carved hieroglyphs gathering shadow and light, like slow sighs exhaled by stone. The scent of cedar oil enveloped you once more, a warm, earthy fragrance that rose gently to mingle with the dry dust and faint traces of burned papyrus. You inhaled it deeply, letting the aroma anchor you into this delicate moment, where silence was both shield and sword. Your eyes traced the edges of the narrow slats by the door, fingers flexing subtly around the familiar bronze form of Horus. The falcon's wings, folded tight, gleamed softly in the unfolding light, a quiet sentinel watching over your careful stillness. Outside, the soft murmur of priests, chants rose and fell like distant waves, their deep voices weaving a sacred tapestry over them. Restless undercurrent of hushed conversation and shifting footsteps. A thin shaft of dawn pressed forward beneath the weathered door, pale and tentative, cutting the darkness with a silver thread. You felt the grains of sand hesitate beneath your toes, the rough texture mingling with the cold stone like a secret conversation between earth and air. The temple seemed suspended in a breathless pause, waiting, watching, folded tightly in the space between night and morning. Your fingers brushed the statuette again, slow and reverent, tracing the delicate ridges of wings and the subtle weight of centuries pressed into cool bronze. Each touch was a prayer not spoken, a silent pact that tethered you to this fragile sanctuary, a slender bridge between shadows and light. The faint scrape of leather whispered just beyond the outer corridor, soft as falling leaves in a distant forest, and your breath stilled for an instant, held captive by the rhythm of measured time. The murmurs beyond thickened slightly, voices hushed, yet urgent, like water lapping quietly against stone. Your gaze lifted to the high pillars, ancient sentinels etched with glyphs that watched you with mute patience, their stories folded into the temple's bones. The sweet scent of incense curled faintly, a ribbon of smoke dancing faintly in the chill. It braided with the dust and cedar, weaving through the atmosphere like a slow song sung beneath the watchful eyes of gods. A subtle movement flickered near the archway, a fleeting shimmer of metal, caught and released by the breaking sunlight. Your heart kept time to the slow dance of shadow and glow, each beat a measured step along a path too narrow, too delicate to misstep. The palm trees beyond stirred softly, their long leaves tracing whispered patterns as a hush of wind wove through the courtyard. In unseen breath it stirred echoes of secrets just beneath the surface. You rose carefully, every muscle coiled yet calm, moving barefoot across the cracked stone floor with a grace born of countless cautious hours spent in concealment. The texture beneath your feet shifted, gritty sand slipping gently between toes, the cold kiss of stone pressing upward beneath the featherweight steps. Your hand trailed lightly along the cool wall, mossy and damp, the roughness grounding you in the present, while the heavy silence wrapped tightly around your shoulders like a shroud. The distant voices reached a crescendo beneath the vaulted roof, low chorus fading into tense whispers, threading through the great temple dome. Faint sounds, scrapes of armor, exchanged glances caught in breathless murmurs, wove together as a quiet network of unease. Your breath slowed, matching the rhythm of cautious footsteps that echoed faintly just beyond reach. You reached the archway and paused, senses draped over every detail, the sharp tang of worn metal, the softness of cracked plaster, the faint crackle of dust stirred by silence. Fingers resting on the altar's worn edge, you dipped them slowly into the chilly water pooled in its basin. The liquid was still and pure, a cool balm seeping into your skin. As the scent of cedar oil rose faintly, a delicate weave of warmth amid the creeping chill. Beyond the doorway, shadows shifted less hesitantly now. A form detached itself from the darker gloom, slow and deliberate, with quiet intent that set nerves alight beneath your skin. Every movement was careful, measured like the ticking hands of a clock, poised just before an unseen hour. The temple held its breath with you, a shared stillness, gripping the vast expanse of stone and sand, a liminal space stretched tight between secrecy and revelation. Your gaze flicked once more to Horus, the statuette's eyes seeming to catch the dawn light, a silent herald watching over the unfolding scene. The faint click of metal punctuated the stillness, sharp yet softened by distance. It was the sound of a threshold crossing, an invisible thread pulled taut as the slow tide of morning slipped further inside your refuge. The fragile balance of this moment folded around you like a fragile membrane, thick with the scent of earth and oil, weighted with the waiting worn into every fissure and shadow held close by ancient stone. You felt the pull of the temple's breath quicken, slow and deliberate, like a heart stretched thin. Bare feet pressed into the cool floor, each grain of sand and crack a silent witness. The air grew thick with scent and sound, the muted scrape of footsteps, a sudden gust stirring dry leaves, murmur of distant voices faltering, as if the temple itself strained to listen. Your hand clenched lightly on the statuette, the bronze cool and unyielding beneath your skin. A subtle gleam caught your eye, a glint of steel, far but unmistakable, threading threads of cold light across the worn flagstones. The courtyard leaves shivered faintly as the wind whispered through, weaving a brief flicker of movement that vanished as quickly as it came. The delicate dance of shadow stretched longer now, restless fingers tracing the temple's ancient ribs. You took a slow breath, the silence pulling taut as a drawn bow. Kneeling once more, you anchored yourself to the altar, feeling the rough stone etch into your palms, the cedar oil's warmth seeping through your skin. The distant chant folded toward a climax, voices hovering like a solemn chant poised to break. Then, beneath the heavy door, the shadow paused. A sudden stillness stilled the rushing air as a cold hand seemed to brush the threshold. In the fragile hush that swallowed all else, a single steady breath slipped from the darkness, and the next moment would unfold with the weight of 1,000 whispered fates. The faint light beneath the door wavered, inching forward like a slow breath held in the cool morning air. You pressed your body flat against the cold stone, feeling every rough edge underneath your weary skin. Your hands gripped the altar's edge tightly, fingers tracing the chipped carvings as if to anchor yourself to something unshakable. The scent of cedar oil mingled with the dusty remains of burned papyrus, a quiet ritual weaving through. The heavy stillness. Outside, the temple seemed to breathe in slow waves. The distant murmur of chants rose and fell like a gentle tide, rippling underneath the deeper undercurrent of whispered footsteps and shifting shadows. Each creak of ancient wood, every muted scrape of leather against stone, felt magnified in that vast, silent cathedral of sand and stone. Your breath remained steady but shallow. Every inhale, a deliberate attempt to tame the tight coil of tension nestled deep within your chest. Your eyes traced the narrow gaps in the door's heavy frame, where the fading light sketched long, fragile fingers along the fragmented stones. Somewhere beyond, a faint shimmer caught your gaze, a distant glint of steel, dull and unreadable, but urgent in its silent promise. The courtyard leaves stirred softly in a hidden breeze, brushing against stone like whispers of secrets long buried beneath the desert's dry embrace. You shifted just enough to catch the cool touch of the bronze statuette in your palm. Horus's falcon wings gleamed faintly, the centuries-old lines feeling alive beneath your fingers, carved with a reverence that still held power even in this fragile moment. The weight of that silent guardian comforted you, its eyes watching patiently, promising protection against distant threats that lurked just beyond sight. Slowly, your bare feet met the grainy floor, the rough sand sifting carefully between your toes, each tiny grain a reminder of the endless desert pressing against this hidden sanctuary. You moved forward with a cautious grace, letting your steps whisper over cracked stone, like folded feathers settling gently in the dawn. The cool air clung lightly to your skin, a sharp contrast to the warm glow of cedar lingering in the narrow chamber. The altar came back into view, its worn surface caught between shadow and the pale morning light. You knelt again, the rough stone biting into your knees, grounding you in quiet ritual. Your hand dipped slowly into the basin of water, the touch cold and real, a small clarity amid the swelling unease. The scent of oil rose once more, rich and earthy, wrapping around you like a faint, protective cloak. Beyond the door, the whispers grew firmer, voices folding carefully over each other in cautious conversation. The scrape of metal brushed against stone, a sound sharp yet subdued, threading its way through the thick silence. Your heartbeat slowed, matching the deliberate rhythm of slow steps drawing nearer. The measured thud of each footfall, a steady drum in the hollow temple halls. You tightened your hold on Horus's statuette as you rose once more, every movement slow and deliberate, a dance of patience beneath the watchful eyes etched in ancient glyphs. The temple around you seemed to shift subtly, the shadows deepening and leaning inward like silent sentinels, as if the walls themselves waited in silent suspense. A sudden flicker of movement caught the corner of your eye, an unhurried shadow peeling away from the darkness beyond the heavy doorway. It moved with practiced precision, deliberate but cautious, embodying the quiet threat that hung just beyond the protective veil of your sanctuary. Your breath caught, years of instinct tightening every nerve beneath your skin. Time itself seemed to contract, folding in slow waves as the tension coiled tighter. The falcon's wings gleamed softly in your grasp, a persistent pulse threading through the cold metal, binding you to a quiet strength. The scent of cedar and damp stone mingled in the air, grounding you even as the heavy silence thickened. The temple's vast space felt sanctified, yet vulnerable, a fragile place caught between the morning sun's arrival and the shadowed footsteps that dared to cross its threshold. Your bare feet moved carefully forward, the cracked floor whispering faint protests beneath your weight. You passed the altar once more, fingers trailing lightly over the worn glyphs, each a story folded into stone, a prayer scratched in time's fading glow. The warmth of the oil seemed to flicker under your touch, a steady wrapping the air in dense anticipation. You paused beneath the arch, palms resting against cold stone, censoring each breath into silence. The gentle ripple of voices ebbed and flowed beyond the walls, underscored by the subtle scrape of armor and the hush of plodding lips. Your gaze lifted to the fading light above, shafts of sun splitting through cracked stone like thin blades, each one a fleeting thread in the fragile fabric of dawn. Then came a sound so slight it could have been imagined, the soft click of metal on stone, deliberate and clear beneath the swelling quiet. Your body tensed, every muscle drawn taut like a bowstring ready to release, and a slow shiver traced down your spine. You knew, without looking, that the balance long held between concealment and discovery was poised to break. The shadow beyond the door halted, as if weighing the threshold with careful intent. The falcon's eyes in your hand caught the pale glow, lips of wings poised but unspread, ready to protect, to witness what was coming. Your heart beat loud in the hollow chamber, steady and deep, each thump a measured step toward the unknown. And then, in the stillness that followed, a faint exhale slipped through the temple, a breath held long and finally released with the quiet certainty that whatever waited beyond the door was no longer content to remain unseen. The soft light crept steadily through the narrow crack beneath the door, no longer a hesitant trickle, but a gentle flood of morning warmth. The ancient stone beneath your palms gave a comforting weight as you pressed closer to the altar, the familiar grooves and worn inscriptions grounding you deeper in the here and now. Horus's bronze wings, cool and resolute in your hands, felt like a living tether, not just to faith, but to survival itself. Outside, the temple stirred more fully. The chorus of priests' chants thickened into a solemn hymn, their melodies weaving like golden threads across the sunlit stones. Yet beneath this sacred music, the earlier tension, the whispered plodding, the shadowed steps edging nearer, had dissolved, replaced by a fragile stillness that breathed relief. You let your breath lengthen, allowing the tight coil in your chest to unwind. The moment that had held you captive was breaking, sliding quietly into the memory of something once urgent, but now settled. The faint scent of cedar oil curled around you, mixing with the warm dust of ancient stones, as if the temple itself exhaled a calm long denied. Steeling yourself softly, you rose, careful not to disturb the silence. Each step echoed lightly in the vaulted chamber, a measured rhythm that no longer sought to escape, but rather embraced the peace blooming slowly between the pillars. Your fingers brushed again over Horus's smooth bronze, a silent conversation of trust and farewell. The falcon's wings forever poised, now carried the weight of closure, a promise kept in shadows and light. Venturing toward the doorway, you paused, eyes tracing the delicate dance of sunbeams spilling onto sand and stone. The courtyard beyond smiled in quiet brilliance, palms swaying gently in the morning breeze, leaves rustling like whispered goodbyes. The gleam of metal, once a threat, rested now dull and still, forgotten among the shifting sands. You sensed that the danger had passed, the delicate threads of deceit and conspiracy unraveling as thoroughly as the dawn chased the night. With a serene, measured breath, you stepped outside your sanctuary. The sun's warmth pooled around you like a soft cloak, the sharp edges of fear softened by light and time. The dusty earth felt solid beneath your bare feet, grounding you in a world renewed, not untouched, but healed enough to offer hope. Ancient voices murmured in the wind, the prayers etched into stone, now joined by your own whispered thanks. Behind you, the temple stood stoic and welcoming, its vast shadows retreating in deference to the new day. The scent of burned papyrus lingered faintly, a reminder of secrets kept and sacrifices made in silence. You traced the temple's contours with your gaze, an old friend whose quiet strength had watched over your hidden worship. As the minutes stretched, the murmurs from the courtyard faded to soft conversations, no longer conspiratorial, but voices weaving a web of cautious peace. The intricate dance of power had shifted, the invisible lines redrawn in favor of quiet endurance and resilience. You felt the pulse of history beneath your skin, the steady beat of countless souls who had found solace in these stones. In the stillness, you reached once more for the statuette of Horus. No longer just a symbol of protection, it was now a vessel of memory, a crystallization of every steady breath taken in darkness, every heartbeat held against the gathering storm. You let your fingers rest lightly on its surface, each ridge a testament to endurance. The falcon's eyes seemed to gleam with quiet approval, wings folded in patient watchfulness, as if inviting you to carry the past gently forward. Around you, the temple gardens seemed to sigh, the soft rustling of palm leaves a lullaby for whispered hopes. The sun climbed steadily, casting golden pools that warmed the rough stones and the grainy earth. Dust motes danced in the shafted light, tiny heralds of peace settling over a sanctuary once bristling with peril. Your thoughts wove through the day's journey just past, the sharp crack of tension, the cautious ritual, the whispered footsteps inching ever closer. Yet now you carried a calming certainty. The fragile balance had held, not by chance, but by ancient bonds of faith, patience, and quiet bravery. The temple's breath matched yours, slow and steady, a rhythm etched into the fabric of time itself. You found a worn stone bench nestled near the temple's edge, moss soft beneath your fingers as you settled into its cool embrace. The world felt wide and deep, calm and resonant, the ripple of history folding into the softness of a new morning. You let your shoulders ease, the tension unwinding fully as your gaze drifted skyward. Quiet birds traced lazy arcs overhead, the desert breeze carrying away the last remnants of unease. With a final reverent touch to the falcon's wings, you tucked the statuette carefully against your chest. It was not the end, but a close, an invitation to rest, to remember, and to carry the story onwards in softer tones. The temple, the gods, the whispered prayers, all embraced the dawn, holding you gently in their timeless vigil. The air grew warm, the shadows faded fully, and a deep silence settled around you, a stillness like a soft kiss, a whispered farewell, a promise of peace. And as the sun rose higher, spilling golden light over temple, sand, and stone, you closed your eyes. The quiet curled around you like a lullaby, slow and steady, guiding you toward rest. Here, in the ancient sanctuary bathed in new light, you found your ending, and beyond it, an unspoken beginning, folded tenderly in the arms of dawn.